Welcome to the Here's Waldo podcast, where we sit down with top visionaries and creatives in the video game industry. Together, we'll unravel their journeys and learn more about the path they're forging ahead. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, I'm Lizzie Mintos, founder and CEO of Here's Waldo Recruiting, a boutique video game recruitment firm. This is the Here's Waldo podcast. In every episode, we dive deep into conversations with creatives, founders, and executives about what it takes to be successful. You can expect to hear valuable lessons from their journey and get a glimpse into the future of the industry. This episode is brought to you by Here's Waldo Recruiting, a boutique recruitment firm for the game industry. We value quality over quantity, transparency, communication, and diversity. We partner with companies, creatives, and programmers to understand the why behind their needs. Before introducing today's guest, I want to give a big thank you to Jenny Shu of Talofa Games. You are a superhuman. Thank you for connecting us. We were just fanning about you before the interview. Today we have Eric Marcoullier with us. Eric co-founded IGN in 1996 and ran product and engineering through its spin-out 3 years later. He was producer at an independent game developer, Cyberlore Studios, from 2001 to 2005, working on games for Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. He started several other companies that were acquired over the years, and far more that went nowhere. Thank you for the intro, Eric. For the last
Just
7
try
years,
to be honest.
Yeah, very humble and honest. Some companies that were acquired by Twitter, etc. But we'll get into that. Over the last 7 years, he has coached first and second-time founders who have not established product or market fit yet. Let's get started. Thanks again for being here.
I'm so excited. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, I want to start with IGN, of course. Can you tell me the story behind starting it?
Yeah, if you're prepared for a couple minutes, there's a couple of really good stories. So first, I'm sorry, coaching mode is always on, so you're just gonna have to live with it. I am a true believer that early stage companies are, due to a lot of luck, and IGN only exists because of a dance music CD that I bought when I was 19. So it was called Speed Limit 140 beats per minute, and years later, I guess not years later, but a year later, went to the University of Florida, had to sign up for an email address, and chose 140 BPM. They're like, no, that doesn't work on Linux. So I said, fine, BPM140 at UFL.edu. Fast forward 3 years later, and 2 years later, and I sent an email to a brand new magazine at like 4 a.m. I'd bought it in Books A Million, read through it. They had this cover-mounted floppy disk. This is the era of cover-mounted media, and loved it. Sent a note saying, hey, editor-in-chief, congrats on the new magazine. I love it. Concerned about your cover-mounted floppy, though. I would love to help. I've got a consulting company here in Florida. And next morning, like literally 7-8 hours later, editor-in-chief rolls in to San Mateo and looks at this email and goes, what the hell? This dude in Florida is going to tell me how to do the internet? But instead of deleting it, sends it to the CEO, who bounces it to the publisher, Next Generation Magazine and Game Players. So publisher of those two magazines, who then calls me up. Like, we're talking from the time I sent it to the time that I get a call back, 8 hours, 9 hours. British guy, I don't do British accents, basically calls me up and says, hey, Eric, your email was forwarded to me. I would love to talk to you about getting our magazines online. However, first, 140 BPM. That's really fast. You must be into the Omni Trio. I am pretty confident that I was the only person in 1995 in Florida who knew who the hell the Omni Trio was. And we ended up talking about dance music for close to an hour. And at the end of it, he goes, hey, like, you sound like a pretty decent bloke. How would you like to fly out to San Francisco next week and talk about getting our magazines online? I flew out, rest is history. Flat out. He only called me because he was into dance music and he noticed my email address, right? No CD, no call back, no me joining Imagine Media. IGN doesn't exist. So the things that make us successful are quite often the things that we can never, ever optimize for. And you just kind of got to do it all every day. So that's how I joined Imagine Media and put two magazines, Game Players and Next Generation Online, both 1995. When I went and interviewed with Johnny, there were 5 video game magazines on the entire web. 5. And we launched Game Players first in, I want to say, late October. And that was the first games website out there that had bulletin boards, had cheat codes. It was very much a community site. And then we launched Next Gen a couple weeks later. Next Gen is hilarious. So when I got hired to be the first web guy at Imagine, this was an era when faxes were still really a thing. And they hired somebody by the name of Colin Campbell, a very veteran games journalist, even back in '95. They hired him to start a video game fax news service for the publishers and developers, the industry. And the plan was every morning they would send out a fax to EA and to Sony and Psygnosis and whoever else, faxes with news. And after about a month, they decided that that was probably not the best approach. And so there was this, again, veteran journalist in the video game space. And I was like, I'll take him. I would absolutely love to have somebody to work with on Next Gen. So he started writing news for us, 6 to 8 articles every day. And we launched. And within a week, it just caught fire around the web. And suddenly everybody knew that the one place to get daily video game news was nextgeneration.com. And it's hilarious because this was a publishing company that had never done anything internet related before. I was a 22-year-old college dropout. I knew loads about building websites, but I didn't know anything about infrastructure, IT, hosting, anything. So we had a Mac clone under my desk running WebStar. You've never heard of WebStar. Nobody's heard of WebStar. But it was basically a really, it was like the only Mac-based web server. And here's this laptop that's sitting under my desk. And at 6 p.m. Pacific time, Monday through Friday, I would hit publish, and all of the news sites, all of the new articles would go live. And at 6:01, the entire internet would descend on NextGen. And within 30 seconds to a minute, the web server would just hang, right? Hundreds, if not thousands of people all beating up against this pitiful little Mac. And I would literally just sit there and go, restart. And it would take about minute and a half to reboot. WebStar would spin up. Immediately, all of these threads would start going. It would run serve pages for about a minute and a half. And then I would go, restart. And we would just do that for an hour or two every night. That was my penance for being early on the web. And eventually, about 6 months later, we decided that we wanted to do something more. I was honestly tired of working with the EICs for the individual magazines because they had a very Next Generation's EIC, editor in chief, really cared about Next Gen, and the Game Players EIC really cared about Next Gen. Game Players editor in chief really cared about PC Gamers editor in chief cared about PC Gamer, and I wanted something broader. And so I went to Johnny, the guy that hired me, and said, "Can we do something brand new brand just online?" And at that same time, we now didn't have 5 or 6 or 7 video game sites on the internet. We had thousands, right? Every single kid with a computer was building a website to talk about Nintendo or Xbox. I guess Xbox wasn't there, but Nintendo or Sega or whatever else. And Johnny was like, you know what? We should be selling ads for every single one of these websites. And so within 3 months, we conceived of PSX Power, N64.com, Saturn World, built them, staffed them, and then launched them. The first one went live September, I think it was 26, 1996, whenever the N64 came out in the US. And the rest is history. An incredible team of editors wrote just article after article that was fun and exciting. And it eventually spun out and went public and was great. A lot of people did really, really well.
How did you find your co-founder?
Again, I at the end of the day, I co-founded IGN as one of the 2 people with the idea. we were both employees of Imagine Media. So I went to my
Okay.
boss and said, we should do this. He said, yes, and we should also do these other things. I said, great. And IGN, originally called the Imagine Games Network. Hence, that's what IGN actually stands for.
I learned something new every podcast.
There we
Okay.
go.
Tell me your biggest learning from your first startup, and then we can get into your other startups.
Can I swear, by the way?
This is a safe space. Yeah.
Okay. This is
Say whatever you like.
Fantastic. Oh my fucking God. What didn't I learn in my first startup? I learned that I'm not nearly as smart as I think I am. I learned that I am a horrendous manager. And ultimately, I learned that what matters most in the universe is really human connection. And at the age of, call it the age of 22 to 25, I knew none of that. And so when Imagine spun out to go public, I was shocked that the 25-year-old college dropout that couldn't manage out of a paper bag was not asked to become an executive at this new company that was getting loads of funding. That was a painful learning experience. And years later, when I had another exit and whatever else, or had my first true personal exit, it really put a lot of that in perspective. And in the 15 years that followed, it feels like every 2 or 3 years, I have another epiphany about those years. And I'm like, oh, something else that I didn't realize when I was a stupid kid. So learning experience really is be a good fucking human being before anything else.
Good advice all around.
There we
Okay.
go.
And then, so IGN spun out, you're gone. And
I'm
then
gone.
you worked at Cyberlore Studios next?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. And then you bought out the parent company. What's that
I
story?
did. Okay. So so again, so many learnings. I'm going to tell you all the stuff that you don't see online. So the editor-in-chief of one of the PlayStation magazines that Imagine had, he and I were best friends, and we were really, really frustrated that most video games suck. And we had decided while I was still at Imagine or at IGN, and he was at Imagine, that we were going to create a consulting company to help development studios make their games better. Because obviously the problem is that all the people making games just don't know how to make them fun. And so I left Imagine and kept trying to do that for about a year. Moved from San Francisco to Boston, and we had a really hard time finding clients that wanted to be told how to make their video games better. So I started actually just looking for a video game job. Went to a meetup in Waltham or something. It's a suburb of Boston. Found all of the local game studios that were there, and basically just asked every one of them for a job. And nobody was hiring. But 3 months later, Cyberlore, which was in Western Mass, sent me a note and said, hey, we met you a couple months ago. You should apply for this product or producer position. So joined them, worked on some not really great games. One, actually, that's not fair. The Mech Warrior for expansion pack, Black Knight, was hella dope. And again, great fucking team of designers and engineers and whatnot that built an amazing expansion pack for the Mech Warrior franchise. Then we made Risk. It was originally going to be for PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. And by the end of the day, it only came out on PC. And that was where I really, really learned that it's not that people making video games don't know how to make things fun. It's that the independent video game studio model does not support making fun and great games. So there's stories behind that I can delve into. But made that, and then we made a video game based on the Playboy franchise, which I assure you was wholesome. It was wonderful. It was on the shelves at Best Buy and a couple of other big box stores. And then, I want to be clear, Cyberlore, long before I got there, had a whole storied history. They made this fantastic game called Majesty, that for people that play real-time strategy games is still kind of a very unique and million-selling sort of experience. But eventually, Cyberlore did what the vast majority of independent game studios do, which is they go bankrupt. Because again, the process and the business of making video games as an independent studio, highs and lows. They eventually couldn't sustain it. They went out of business. I had been working on making serious games, always been entrepreneurial. And so even there was like, hey, there's this new thing, this new industry. Chased that. And we got a contract with Best Buy to make video games to teach all the blue shirts how to sell and basically upsell. And I was laid off, or the entire company went kaput 3 months before my first son was born. And then my wife, now ex-wife, but my wife at the time, was laid off 2 weeks after my first son was born. And it was that exact moment that I said, hey, can I put a second mortgage on the house to buy the assets of Cyberlore? I'm pretty sure it was the postpartum, but her response was, we're nearly bankrupt, let's go all in. And so I bought the assets of Cyberlore, and that serious games company completely crashed and burned. It was an absolute nightmare. I had no fucking clue what I was doing. It did not validate the market at all, other than getting one customer. But I, as a side project, had been working on a small startup idea. And in the 20 months from the time that I bought out the assets of Cyberlore, within 20 months we had a sale to Yahoo for something that was completely different. And so, again, total luck. If I hadn't taken the second mortgage on the house to go, try and do this one company, this other company wouldn't have thrived. You just got to keep throwing baskets up.
Yeah. So what did you learn from the crash and burn of Cyberlore? Many things. So many fucking things.
So many fucking things. There we go. Good math on you. So first and foremost, what I learned is that the publisher indie relationship is totally broken. I'm sure you've heard this from other people. I'm sure you've heard this from your customers. But at the end of the day, independent game studios only survive, generally speaking, unless they've done incredibly well, right? Think id back in the day, or think Origin pre-sale to EA. If you are just a working studio, you only survive when you have a contract. And that contract is very uneven, right? You've got pre-production where you only have a handful of people, right? It's obviously more these days, but back in 2003, let's say that pre-production might require 8 people on staff. And then you hit production and suddenly you're bringing on 20 or 30 people. And that's what pays for your company to survive, is being in production. What frequently happens is that you get to the end of your pre-production milestones and everybody looks around at each other in the room and says, this isn't fun. Like, this game sucks. We haven't figured it out yet. And you, as a dev studio, have 2 options. Either work for free until you figure out how the game is good, or you say, oh, we'll fix it in post, right? We need to start collecting those production milestones. So we're bringing everybody on. We're going to make all this content on this game that is fundamentally broken, but somehow we're going to fucking fix it. And that never happens. And so that's broken. Secondly, right, if you are a AAA studio, independent studio, right, you've made what's it now? Probably 2.5 million or 5 million qualifies as AAA level sales. If you have sold a game in whatever genre, first-person shooter, and publisher comes to you and says, we want you to make X. You say, great, like, we're available, and it'll cost $75 million. They go, great, right? They can do the basic math. If this sells at least 2.5 million, we're going to make bank on this. 75 million, fucking go for it. If nobody's available, then it just goes out to bid. And it's like playing the worst game of name that tune ever, because you know that a AAA game is going to cost, maybe not 75 million, but certainly 50 million or whatever else, maybe 300 million. I mean, look at Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Right? Spider-Man 2. But so you're not going to get that money, right? You're probably not going to get 20 million. And so you start thinking, how low can we bid and still keep our studio afloat? And suddenly you're bidding, right? 5 million, 6 million for a game that's going to get in the market, competing against $200 and $300 million games. You know that you're not going to actually be able to finish that game for $6 million. The publisher knows that you're not going to make that game for $6 million, but everybody plays along with the kabuki theater They sign the contracts because what happens is you get a third of the way or halfway through production, and the studio has to go hat in hand to the publisher and say, hey guys, we need another $4 million. And the publisher goes, great, not a problem. We love the game that you're making. We believe in you. Here's your $4 million. And we're going to add a couple things to the contract for this game. One is we're going to ensure that you never see any profits from this. And two, we are going to insert a right of first refusal clause that says for up to a year, if we decide that we want a sequel, you will unilaterally do this sequel at roughly the same terms. And so once you're done, once you send that gold master out, right, you're furiously searching for that next game project. And every fucking publisher goes, hey, that game that you just shipped, does that have a right of ROFR clause? And when they find out that it does, they mostly skip, because what they don't want to have happen is you have a game in production for them and then be contractually obligated to take everybody off and go make the sequel. So it is a game, or it is a game in the games industry that is built to destroy independent game studios. That's what I learned in 5 years of making games.
Okay, so what's the solution? Tell me the answer now.
Right. I mean, it's funny. I was just listening to the Ralph Koster podcast with you. And that, I mean, obviously that dude is so smart. There's a reason that guy's a legend in the industry. And the way I look at it is there are three ways of making games. You can either be true indie, you can be an independent studio that works for publishers on contracts, or you can raise venture capital. And they all have different pluses and minuses. Indie studios, right, make small games. You're never going to make the next Quake or Wolfenstein or Doom as a studio with 6 people. It's just you're going to make it Among Us. You're going to make a mobile game, whatever else. But you can probably, to some degree, keep your own agency and really, win or lose based on your own success. There's 12,000 games in the Steam store right now, but you at least have a chance of making something and paying your bills. Working as an independent publisher or independent developer for publishers, it's a stacked deck, and it's only gotten worse in the last 5 years because now there's half as many publishers as there used to be. Right? Activision Blizzard, now part of Microsoft. Well, shit, they're taking that publisher off the table. All the companies that have been acquired by Take-Two, right? I mean, it's a fewer and fewer number of publishers. So I don't really know what's good about that. I mean, really, that model allows for one thing. You put 30 people or 40 people under one roof. And if everybody looks at each other and says, we're going to do a death march, right, EA spouse style, for the next 2 years, and we are going to build a $20 million game on an $8 million budget, you may have a breakout hit. And if that happens, fan-fucking-tastic. Your next game, you're going to make for 70 million, right? Go you. But that is a hard slog. It's kind of like starting a startup. Option C, the venture funding model, it is not good at all for AAA title or AAA scale games. And that's what a whole lot of game studios are really learning right now. And so I really feel like if you want to go into the venture scale side of things, you either need to be making game tools, which has some challenges, but it could be really fun, right? You're making the next, shader. You're making the next, I talked to somebody today that's looking at doing a generative music tool for creating dynamic music, like pretty dope. You can sell a lot of companies. Or make small games predictably and reliably and get somebody to give you a bunch of money to start doing that more and more. Yeah. But holy shit, if you want to make a AAA scale game, I wouldn't even fathom doing it as an independent studio. It's a fucked up market right now.
Rough. There are a lot of top games that are Roblox and Fortnite games right now. That's another interesting new avenue.
It is, of course, Roblox, right? Took 11 years to catch on. And there was a lot of money that was poured into that business. right? Famously, Fortnite. That was a complete fluke, right? They were doing the save the world or whatever it is. So that's the entire reason that the concept of building is in that game is because they were building a single player game, and then they saw PUBG and was like, hey, we could build something like that, and that became the game. So much luck. And the one thing that the video games industry will always have going for it is people like me in my, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, truly loved video games and just wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And right, the machine grinds people up, and there's always new people that come in and say, I would like to do that, not knowing just how hard it is. But holy crap, when you actually play a game that you made and you're enjoying it, there's even better seeing somebody else playing a game that you made and they're enjoying it. Nothing better. So I get it. I don't think we have to worry about the industry anytime soon.
Yeah, still growing overall. Talk to me about funding advice. There's so much money going into seed stage companies right now, but Series A is hard. Series B, although I saw 100 million for second dinner today.
Nice. Right on. So again, I'll go back to tools, small games, AAA games.
Yeah.
The challenge with funding in the video game space is that it is at least when you're talking about AAA games, it is completely orthogonal to the way that that venture capital typically works. So, right, and I'm telling a watchmaker how to make a watch, but for the purposes of your audience, those of who have never engaged with venture capital versus traditional games. Let's talk about traditional game publishing. So again, like going back to what I said before with the publisher says, we need a game that looks like X. And you go, great, it's going to cost us 5 million or 10 million. If you're a AAA studio, 70 million. They're like, great, signed up for it. You go through your pre-production milestones, and there's always the chance that the publisher just says, screw it, we're canceling this project. You especially see it in internal studios, but you never have to sell anybody else, right? You make the game, at least you start doing pre-production and the production, and everybody knows what they're getting. And there is a commitment from the people with money that says, if you keep meeting your milestones, we're going to keep funding this, and we're eventually going to put it on the shelves. You only have to ever convince one group of people, one company, that this is a game that needs to get made.
Yeah.
In the venture capital world, let's take games out of the picture for a second. You're a startup, right? You're GNIP, and a company that started years ago. And you go to early stage investors and you say, I've got this idea. Maybe I've got a little bit of traction, but this is right. I need $1 million to go grow this business. And they give you the money, and you start to grow, or you get more traction, you get better metrics. You don't typically go back to that same investor to get more money. You go to a new investor, or a new group of investors, and you say, hey, now we've got more traction, and you should put $5 million into us. And they go, great, you're looking good. And so they put $5 million into you, and now you get more traction and more traction. And you go to yet another group of investors, and you say, we've got all of this traction. Give us $30 million or $100 million. And each time, each stage gate, you're talking to a different group of people, and you're showing them progress, measurable fucking progress that allows them to somewhat rationally go, we should invest in this one, but not these 6 or these 100.
Yeah, 100.
Now let's talk about how a AAA game is funded. And I have so many friends whose startups are on fucking fire right now because of VCs. The independent game studio, right? There's just a handful of founders, and they're like, we've got this vision for a brand new type of first-person shooter. And they go to early stage investors, and they go, great, here's $1 million. And so they get their pre-production done. No users, no reason for anybody to know whether or not this is actually a good game, other than the new batch of investors that they're talking to look at it and go, yeah, that looks like fun. Here's 5 million. You know what 5 million gets you for a traditional big budget game? Like 5%, 10% of production. And so suddenly it's 18 months later, you're 5 million and more, and you got to talk to another group of investors who have no idea who you are. And they're looking at this game that's had $6 million poured into it, no fucking traction, no users, no nothing. And an entirely new group of investors are looking at a broken toy, trying to figure out, should we put $20 million into that? Let's say you get your 20 million. Generally speaking, if you're making that true AAA scale game, you've still got to go to one more investor. And you got to convince them to put $40 million into your half-finished game. It's all, the entire VC model is based on the idea of somebody else taking you over, taking your portfolio over the finish line. And that is based on traction, something that does not happen in this space. So when it comes to VC funding for games in 2024, tools are great. Small games, right, where you put out a first game as an indie and it gets traction, and you say, hey, we would like to make 5 more of these, or we'd like to grow this thing in the market and put out more levels and put out sequels and put out whatever else. That traction is so critical. And so the thing that I think I'm most excited about in the next couple of years is we're probably going to see the end of AAA funding for games in the VC space. I think we're going to see an absolute renaissance in indie studios with some level of funding, 250K, 500K, 750. And a good, smart team can do a lot with 500K. So I think we're about to see an absolute new benchmark in terms of crazy games that are fun and have higher production value than we've typically seen in indie level games. And that's going to be great because they only cost $10, right? So get ready to buy a lot of $5 and $10 games.
What games are you most excited about right now in that space? What's an example of someone who's done a great job with a little amount of money?
Oh man, it's certainly old news, but I think that the guy behind Vampire Survivors just absolutely crushed it. Right, I was late early, right? So I was probably first 10,000 players of that game, but certainly not first 100. But it was still, I think it is probably a second release, and so we had 2 maps, the base level of weapons and buffs and whatever else. And for the next year and a half, just watching every month or two, him putting out, hey, here's the next set of things. It was fucking crazy. It was amazing. And the thing that saddens me about that is because that guy really only ever seemed to have any interest in PC. There are so many knockoffs that basically took exactly that vampire levels. I always think of it as like tower defense, but you're the tower and you can move. There are so many of those games on iPhone and Android. And if he had raised capital and built out a small team, he could have absolutely dominated that. And I know he made several $1 million, but order of magnitude. So maybe multiple orders of magnitude more that he could have done. So when it comes to small games, I think that dude, that the standard. So often, it seems like the really great indie games come out like just unexpected overnight. So I don't know what I'm going to be playing next. I actually just bought a PS5 because I'm really excited about Grand Theft Auto 6 18 months from now.
Of course you are. Who is it?
I haven't played Grand Theft Auto since GTA 2 when it was still top down. So I am truly excited about seeing what the second most grossing game ever looks like next gen. Should be pretty cool. What are you excited about on the game side?
What am I excited about? I need to play Palia. I'd like to play that game. I'm playing Among Us. I'm working and I'm exercising. And I told you I have 2 little kids. I'm doing that. And occasionally.
So the last thing that you can possibly do is play games. I get that.
And I have to play games, which is funny. I do for market research. I have to be informed. I have every possible kind of console, right?
Nice.
But am I doing it a lot in my free time right now? No, I don't have a lot of free time right now.
Can I tell you something kind of sad? In my 20s and 30s, the absolute best vacation for me was buying a bunch of video games, buying a bunch of books, DVDs, movies, whatever else, just a lot of content, and just literally going off the grid for a week and just consuming content nonstop. This past holiday between Christmas and New Year's, bought a PS5 for the family, but basically it was just me. Bought a bunch of books and spent 7 straight days just staring at screens and pages. And at the end of it, I was like, wait a second, what the fuck did I just do with a week of my time?
No, that's a
So
fantasy. That's like mom with young kids fantasy. Maybe even like checking out of my house. Actually, even just being in a hotel is my fantasy. Like even like Holiday Inn, I don't even need
as
anything nice, just as long as nobody needs anything from me.
I
So
totally get it. Totally get it.
I look
But
forward to those days.
for like a weekend, like 2 days sounds blissful.
Yeah.
I spent a week playing video games, and I can honestly say, I wish that I had that week back.
Oh,
There,
okay.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that at the end of it, I was like, wait a second, there are so many things I could have done with that week, and not like working, but just like connections.
Yeah.
So I think I'm making the pivot to more social games and multiplayer games, which never did in my 20s and 30s. So I'm excited for what this new generation brings. Maybe I'll see you in
Good.
Among Us.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
I'm a pretty social person and I really don't like to be inside of my house. I just maybe I'm restless. I like to do stuff and I like to be out of my house. And even my little 3-year-old, he tells me if we've been inside all morning, Mama, let's go somewhere. I'm like, okay,
That's
let's do it.
awesome. That's amazing. Hold on to
Yeah,
that.
it's my little clone. Okay, so you worked at this game studio and then you started a not game company and
Yes,
then it
my
got
blog line.
acquired, okay, by
Yep.
Yahoo, and then you had other ones that got acquired by Twitter. And I'd love to hear about your life, ups and downs, how you felt about yourself during this crazy series of exits.
Oh shit. I feel like you read a blog post or two. Um,
Maybe.
so so um, we are told by investors, by our peers, by the media, whatever else, that you work hard, you sacrifice, you do whatever it takes. And if, you know, lo and behold, at some point you have that exit and you make some life changing money, everything gets better. And it is a lie. It's an absolute lie. Nothing changes except the size of your bills. Uh, I, One of the few things that I really am happy with my father from my childhood is that he got me into high-end stereos. And back when I was in 12, a high-end stereo certainly wasn't $1,000 shit. But I got my first set of like separate, so not like a stereo, but individual components when I was 12, and I leveled that up when I got my first job at Imagine. Then a couple years later, I just constantly upgrading stuff. And when I finally had that exit to Yahoo, I went out and spent like $30,000 on a stereo, and it was really really nice. And I think still it's actually right back there, and it's back, and it's wonderful, and I enjoy it. But it didn't fucking change my life at all. Not
Yeah.
even the stuff that I bought. And when that same week that I sold my blog log, we sold my blog log to Yahoo. I beat the shit out of my car with my bare hands because I realized I was still married to somebody I didn't love. I was miserable as a father. I was out of shape. I had no fucking life. And it was all supposed to change. It was all supposed to be better. And it didn't. It was just the same thing, only higher costs. And so it's definitely something that I'm trying to teach other people every chance I get, which is you can actually be happy and fulfilled right now. You can do the things that matter to you without having a multi-million-dollar payoff. And the insane thing is people pay me $30,000 to $40,000 a year to help them with their startups. They meet with me for an hour a week, and they pay me between $600 and $800 an hour. And I can't get people to pay me $5,000 a year to teach them how to be happy and fulfilled. And I mean, Maslow's hierarchy, it's a real thing. Until you achieve right fourth level, the esteem of your peers, nobody cares about self-actualization. I think we're hardwired for it. But it is insane to me that theoretically we work in order to be happy we work in order to fund a good life, but people will gladly pay through the nose to learn how to be better at their job and won't pay anything to learn how to be better at life. So again, lessons learned. Don't wait until you have the exit in order to actually focus on the shit that matters.
So what can you do if you're a startup founder? You have two little kids. It's not me.
No.
You're in a slog.
I swear to God, if this is like this becomes like the title of this podcast, if you turn it into like Eric Marcoullier promises you that he can teach you how to be happy, that's all I fucking care about. Like everything else, whatever. I will tell you right now, it's actually pretty straightforward. The first thing is that when we hear, if you go online and you look up like how to be happy, like what should I do? Everybody tells you, gratitude, religion, fucking connection. They'll tell you like you look at the top 10 results for how to be happy. There's like 1,000 different things, certainly 100 different things that you can do. I don't know about you. I don't have time to do 100 different things every day. I can't every single day check in. Was I helpful today? Did I practice gratitude? Did I journal? Did I go to church? Did I, do one of 100 different things?
Sure. Yeah. No.
Exactly. I mean, literally, that would be our day. I think that most people are drawn naturally to the things that make them happy, right? You glow when you talk about your kids and you started a company, right? Very few people start a company because they hate business, right?
Yeah.
And very few people work specifically in the video games industry for very long if they don't actually love that industry. And so it's not so much doing different things, it's doing the things you're already doing differently. And honestly, even there's not a big shift there. For me, what I coach is you figure out your most important values in life. And that's such an arbitrary thing. Like if I was to ask you, like, what are your like top 5 or 6 values? Could you, without making it up on the spot, could you tell me like what the most important things in your life are?
I thought about it for a while. Yeah. But do I have it pre-rehearsed? No.
So for me, excellence, fatherhood, intimacy, connection, music, creativity, and strength. Those are the things that really derive meaning for me week after week, month after month, year after year. So you figure out the things that matter most to you. And again, the iterative process. You're going to pick some stuff and you'll be like, after a month, you're like, oh, you know what? Like this other stuff, these 3, fuck them. Doesn't matter. I don't really care. These other ones, dope. I like these really, like focusing on these things changed my month. Let me try some other things that might work. So you figure out effectively what matters. So for instance, let's say connection. Actually, even better, creativity. Creativity is one of my values. Creativity is basically just creating something from nothing. Creating a really great blog post can scratch my itch for creativity. I do stained glass. I do carpentry. Not nearly as often as I could, but when I do it, it can absolutely create that itch. I do a monthly CEO dinner. And in the moment of being there with 40 CEOs and a handful of other people, like there's definitely a sense of creation there. Once you figure out what those things are that connect you to that, you basically want to figure out what the difference between a just a normal run of the mill experience versus that sort of like touching God. How are you really connected with that value? Fatherhood is one of my core values. I love my children. My children are arrogant pricks a lot of the time. They're teenagers, they're teenage boys. And so quite often, like driving my younger son to school, it's 15 minutes of silence, right? Like that is not a great fatherhood moment. But what I do know is that when I feel most like I'm being a great dad, it's when one of my kids has the spotlight. I'm talking far less than I'm listening, and they're equally engaged. So I'm asking them questions, and they're feeling very seen and very heard, and they're very excited about whatever it is. And I'm fully focused on them. It's not like, yeah, okay, quit talking because I got to do whatever else on my computer. I'm fully engaged, and they're fully engaged. The world just closes down. Knowing that means that if I am being thoughtful and I'm driving my son to school, I might in that moment think, oh shit, like I'm talking too much. Ask more questions. And if that flips around, then that one last little bit, right, is just recognizing in the moment, like this matters. right? So music is one of my values. And one of the ways that I know that I'm really connecting to it is I've got a very sort of like psychosomatic response to music. If music is really hitting me, I dance, I fucking move, like I bounce, whatever else. And every once in a while, I'll be listening to something and moving around. I'm like, oh, wait a second, like this song, like
This is it.
this is it, this is it. Like at this moment, I am connected to music, and you only need to feel it for a second to feel this absolute like frisson of joy, and then you just sink right back into it, right? Like the moment when you're like, for me, when that world really does just like shrink down. And I once had dinner with a friend in Chinatown in New York. We got together at like 8 o'clock at night, and places jumping, whatever else is totally busy. And we're talking. She and I are absolutely reviving. And at a certain point, I realized that it was utterly quiet in the restaurant, and I looked around, and there was nobody. Right, the staff was like meekly standing in the corners, and I realized it was 11 o'clock at night. The place had closed at 10, and the staff just didn't want to interrupt. Like in that moment, to be like, oh, holy shit, like I've connected with another human being, doesn't require an exit, doesn't require doing anything differently. It just requires knowing, like for me, I have to full screen a blank browser. Like if I'm talking to somebody and I can see my text and I can see my email, I'm going to be fucking distracted. I can fix that. Right. And then that moment, like when you and I are absolutely like vibing and whatever else, to be like, oh shit, I actually did it. I connected with another human being. Anybody, you can do that tomorrow and your life will be better for it. No matter how good your life is now, it can always be better.
I heard this talk from the wealth manager who managed Bill Gates' money, Elon Musk's money, and he was talking about the things that made somebody at that level who could have literally anything in the world happy. It's dinner,
What did he say?
dinner with a friend, and then going on a walk. That's like one of the best things. But that's so easy, right? You need probably no money to do that. You make a cheap meal.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
easy.
I could walk right out that door right there and go for a walk.
Yeah.
Right? The
With a friend, that's the best.
money is a great insulator from the bad, but it doesn't generally create the good. There is no value or no meaning itself in money. All it is a means to an end. And one of my favorite phrases with my fiance is, "If we can throw money at it, it's not a problem." And that's a privileged statement, but at any given level, there's more. As you increase, there's more and more stuff that that you can throw money at. Right? I have written off, at least in my mind, at least one of my cars that my kids are getting, because I figure one's 18, one's 16. One of those cars is getting totaled.
They're going to crash it for sure. Yeah.
They're going to fucking crash it for sure.
For sure.
And I am very much in the privileged and blessed space of being able to say, you know what, doesn't fucking matter. I was expecting that. We can buy another car. Please don't crash this one. That, if I don't know, if I got some rare disease, I probably can't afford to to get the world's best care. Elon Musk can, right? Bill Gates can. Bill Gates can fucking eradicate malaria in Africa. At each level, you can insulate yourself from more and more bad stuff. But all of the things that really matter to us as human beings, at least from a self-actualization standpoint, we can do today without any money. I don't need to have any money to have friends. At least not, friends that would like me if I was poor. And there are those people out there, I promise. I'm really, really excited about more people just trying to look at their lives right now and saying, again, like, I'm doing this work probably because I love it. And even like, fuck, if you work at, I don't know, you work at a shit SaaS company as a developer, like, can you honestly say, I love the meaning of my job? Probably not. But if you're a developer, right, maybe what you really value is focus, right? Figure out how to do whatever you need to do with your meetings to get flow at least once a day. And in that moment, right, when time's just going by and you don't even notice it, the ability to go, oh shit, like I'm doing it. I'm just coding. That's great. Maybe one of your values is development of others, right? Is service. And it's like, great, fucking go find an entry level developer and become their mentor. Like everybody has the power in whatever they're fucking doing.
Yeah.
To connect it to the meaning that matters most to them.
And to make their life better, I think. That maybe that's a very privileged statement, but I always think that, right? So many people complain, but like, what are you doing to help yourself or to help other people?
Absolutely. It takes effort to be happy.
Yeah.
Welcome to my TED Talk. Thank you for listening. I totally want to interview you. Like, I feel like nobody has done that. I want to hear about
Let's do it.
Here's Waldo. Great. All right. So tell me, first and foremost, how did you end up running a recruiting company in the games industry?
Starts at a bar. Actually, maybe it starts in my childhood.
Where all good stories start.
When I was a kid, my dad had a company. He had a sawmill, and he would take me to work with him, and he'd try and teach me how to do all of these things, how to balance a checkbook, how to do physical labor, which I was not into, and he was really disappointed. But although I don't want to work at a sawmill, what I did, I saw him take care of his employees. He'd give them fish bonuses. Like he'd buy 1,000 pounds of salmon and send them all home with fish. He'd get someone a custom-made guitar. He'd take them on fishing trips. Nobody quit, and everybody loved working for him because he'd always go out of his way to make them happy. And I watched him work hard, but I think he set a good example in that way. And so I always wanted to have my own business, or at least I always thought it was possible. He is not someone who would ever tell me, hey, here are the things you need to do. Hey, why don't you talk to this mentor? None of that. He's just like, hey, I think you're going to figure it out, which is also kind of my parenting style too.
I love it. Yes.
I worked at sales in Nordstrom. I knew I didn't want to work in sales, but I learned a lot. And I met somebody at a bar who was a friend of a friend, right? Had I not gone to this bar, who knows what my life would be. But it's the butterfly effect, but also making it happen. So she told me, she was a recruiter. You talk to people, you help them find jobs. So I was like, that sounds great. So she introduced me to her friend, who was this quirky guy named Ted. And I connected with Ted, and he's like, yeah, why don't you interview at the recruiting company? I knew I needed to get a new job, but I didn't really know how. So I interviewed, and then they sent me this really basic rejection letter. And it's like, oh, this seems really like generic, right? Whatever, we're not fit, you're not fit, we're going to go forward with other candidates. So I was looking through the CEO's profile, and then I was looking at people who'd left him reviews, and I was looking at this guy, and I messaged him, and he messaged me back. And then he asked if I wanted to get on a call. He's kind of a career coach. And I said, I'd love that. He's like, hey, if you really want this job, what can you do to really go above and beyond? What can you do to convince them that you should work there? And I was like, okay, I'm going to contact the CEO, and I'm going to say I want to have a meeting with him. And I'm going to tell him that I think that I would be one of his best employees. And I'm going to do a lot of research, because I didn't research that much when I was interviewing. So I came in. Well, first I talked to him, and he really just wanted to tell me about his company and how great it was. And I was like, I know, it's really great. I want to work here. But I'm interested. And he's like, okay, why don't you come back in? So I came back in. I was so nervous, but I had in my notebook, I'd written down like, what is JavaScript? Like, what are all these programming languages? All these terms I knew nothing about. It was a tech recruiting job. And they ended up offering me the job, and I ended up being their best employee. And I worked there for 4 years. And then, but I always had this itch to scratch. It was the pandemic, and it was not an environment that I wanted to be in necessarily, not an uplifting environment. And I was pregnant, but no one knew I was pregnant because it was work from home, which was awesome. So when I found out I was pregnant, it's like, okay, I think I need to quit. So I made my business plan, and I quit, and I had a non-solicit, so I couldn't solicit anyone. I didn't. I just reached out to my network, and then it just exploded. And then I had a baby, and I had 2 employees. And I went back to work 5 days later, which is not a good thing. I don't advise. It was just kind of like a situational kind of thing. Right. It was what I had to do. But I could nurse, I could talk on the phone, and I could type, and I'd be like, oh yeah, there's my baby here. And I'd wake up start work maybe at 11 a.m. and I'd work late and weird hours, but I made it work. Now I'm here.
So many awesome things in there. One thing I want to call out, because you mentioned it as well, right? Saying that so much of success is based on luck doesn't mean that you just get to sit on your ass and wait for luck to come from you. We manufacture luck by doing as many things as possible, reaching out to as many folks. going above and beyond in your interviews, like not taking no for an answer. All of this is 100% true. You just don't know which one of those things is going to pay off. So you basically just have to keep buying lottery tickets. So completely agree.
Thank you. And going places, I think I've read many business books, but especially when I was starting my recruiting career, I wanted to do a good job. And I read so many, every self-help book. I'd go to seminars. And one of them, the advice was just go out to lunch a lot of days, get to know the people at the cafe, get to know their names. Maybe they'll be your friend. Maybe they'll introduce you to someone. Jenny was on the podcast. One of her investors was someone from a fitness class that she was running. Right?
That's awesome.
Like that's luck, but that's also you putting yourself out there and meeting people and making an impression on people, and that takes you somewhere.
Hell's yes, 100%. I love the fact that your dad owned a business and that he did those individual things for people. Something that I learned at Imagine. First time, Johnny gave me a bonus. He was like, "Hey, like, we've talked about dance music so much. You've said that you always wanted to make dance music. I could give you $2,000 as a bonus, but I want you to go out and I want you to buy $2,000 worth of music equipment."
Yeah.
30 years later, I still remember that bonus. Yeah. And I remember the second bonus that I got the second time I ever went snowboarding was he offered me a trip anywhere in the world to go snowboarding. And I went to Mount Hood over 4th of July weekend. And the idea of snowboarding while looking at a lush green forest. I mean, it's like, I'm not a religious person, but that like, it's a spiritual thing. Your father cared about his employees, which is pretty obvious. So that's a really amazing thing to learn when you're a kid.
It's fun to see. Yeah. They'd bring me little toys and he'd always take me there and have me meet people. But he'd tell me, here's what I'm going to do, right? This person's coming. I know they like this, or we're going to take them out to dinner. We're going to do this thing that they love. So,
That's
but
awesome.
I love doing that. That fills up my cup. I like to make other people happy and bring other people clarity, which is really just what recruiting is. So it's fun. I remember, by the way, when I started my recruiting job, it was terrible. I made no money. I had no money. I was making 75 cold calls a day. It was terrible. I was driving an hour each way to work. And I remember talking to somebody, but telling them about what recruiting was. And they're like, I think that was made for you. That's perfect.
My mom was on the opposite side when I was very young. She was a placement counselor. And when I was 19, I lost my scholarship to Tulane. New Orleans, wonderful place to get an education, not a great place to go to college. Too many distractions. But so I lost my scholarship to Tulane and I came home and my parents were like, absolutely, like, you can live here as long as you need. We're going to, room and board, whatever else, we'll pay for community college, but you have to find a job. You have to pay for, gas and dates and whatever else you want to do. And me being a punk 19-year-old, I was like, well, how do I do that? And my mom handed me a phone book and literally said, start with A. And I'm like, what does that mean? And she goes, open the phone book to A, start calling and saying, I'm a college student and I'm looking for a job. I'll do anything. And that sense of, even though I imagine you were hugely successful in sales, and then you pivot to a new job, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be successful day one. You put in the fucking effort. You started with A. You just did all of the things you had to do to learn.
Yeah.
And
I go in on the weekend. Yeah. I mean, that's what you have to do. And your job, you have to eat shit for a while. Like your first job is not going to be a good one, probably.
Sometimes you luck out, but generally speaking, you have to pay your dues. And the thing with that mid-career choice, right? I mean, I was making 100K whatever when I was 25 at Imagine, and back in 1999, 1998, that's pretty good, especially for being 25. And then I decided I wanted to make video games, and I had no fucking experience. It didn't matter that I started one of the biggest websites on the internet. All right, I'm making video games now, and I'm going to be a project manager. And they paid me 30 grand, and it was fucking fair, right? Like, I busted my ass, I got raises, whatever else, but I wanted to do this other thing more than I wanted the short-term money. And tell me that that isn't the basis of any startup founder, right? It's the
Yeah.
thing that I had this conversation today with somebody where they were saying, like, should I do A, B, or C? And I'm like, well, C's fucking off the table. Don't do that. But at the end of the day, which of these choices would you be happy with spending 5 years on if you never had a pot of gold at the end of this? Right? Like, let's say you can pay yourself some basic salary, you raise capital or you bootstrap and you can pay yourself a living wage, but that's all it is for the next 5 years. Which of these options in front of you would you literally just say, thank you, universe? This is what I was meant to do, right? The money should be the sort of like the and one. It shouldn't be the goal. And if you're going to take a mid-career change, which it seems like everybody's doing these days, like, choose something that you're excited to do, that you're willing to take the sacrifice on income, because this is what you were meant to do. Right? Like, so many people ask me, like friends and a woman that I'd never met before this morning, that I was talking with for an hour. She's like, so what are you going to do next? And I'm like, coach, this is what I was meant to be doing. I'm 50 and I did my years of startups and I loved them and I hated them and they were challenging. But this, helping other people build their companies. If I was, completely, supported sugar mama or had made more money than I did from my acquisitions, whatever else, I would be doing this exact same thing. I'd be helping founders because I feel excellent when I do it, right? There are very few meetings that I have where at least once I don't go, oh man, like that was fucking useful. Like, she's going to remember that thing. And there are, a lot, not every, but most meetings that I have with somebody, whether it's a new client, new prospect, old client, at least a couple times a week, the world just shrinks in. And it's just me and that other person. So just in coaching, I am getting nourished by the things that matter most to me. And it feels like so many founders are just looking for the payday. And it's like, you
Yeah.
don't want to build a startup, you want to have a startup. Those are two very different things.
It is different. I think that's
All right.
true for 99% of the time, except for if you, let's say you have a lot of kids, you live in San Francisco, you're a single parent, your kids are going to college, you might have to make some different choices. But for the most part, yes, when life
For the
allows you
most,
to, even if you're uncomfortable and you can't live your cushy life, you should do it unless
yes.
you have that pressing need. I would agree. Okay.
There
I
are
have
definitely outside constraints. What were you going to say?
generally no. Okay. I have one last question. Who have your biggest mentors been or your biggest coaches? And what have they told you that has really, really stuck with you?
This is gross, and I don't like saying this.
Okay.
I haven't really had any, and it's like the sort of the flip side of this question is like, who do you admire most?
Okay.
Um, I don't really admire people, and I don't understand what that is. And it's probably like this combination of TMI or very weird or whatever else. I don't think I know most people well enough, like
Yeah.
like Bill Gates. I know he made a lot of money, right? I know that he built Microsoft and whatever else. But if you actually asked me, like, what did Bill Gates do day to day throughout his entire Microsoft run? I don't know, right? Steve Jobs. So many founders are like, oh, I should be an asshole like Steve Jobs. I'm like, no, no, no. Steve Jobs was successful despite being an asshole. That's how smart he was. But if you ask me, like, what did Steve Jobs actually do? Like, maybe I should go read the Walter Isaacson book or whatever else. But I don't really know famous people like about them enough to be like that person or that person or that person is really worth admiring. Um, what I can tell you is, um, as an adult, the first person I worked for was Johnny, and Johnny's complete management practice was handing me a copy of the 1 Minute Manager and saying, like, this might help. Um, you cannot fathom how bad of a manager I am, and that didn't help. Right? Johnny was like, Eric's smart; he'll figure it out. Right? You're in my parenting style. that was his management style. Was Eric will figure it out, and I did on some things. I mean, IGN's pretty cool, but nobody ever wanted to work with me. And after that, I worked at Cyberlore, and Joe Minton, who, if you haven't had Joe on the show, he would be an
Haven't.
absolute fantastic interview. He's one of the co-founders of DDM, big game agency. Knows more about games than I could even hope to learn in 1,000 years. But anyway, he was the CEO of that company, and he was busy. Like, he was the sales guy, and so there was nobody in the company saying like, "Hey, this is how you project manage." Everything was learned by process of failure. Almost every single company since then that I've worked at has been a startup that I started. So I've never really went out and got mentors on that front. The thing that I can suggest to founders out there listening is, if I've had advisors, but I've never used them. It's a very common problem with founders as we go and collect advisors. And then a year later, we're like, why do we give them a quarter point or half point of the company? They didn't fucking do anything. Because we actually have to engage with them. And so they're busy. Like, look, if you were mentoring somebody, you're like, I got 2 kids, I got a business, I got to exercise, I got to do all these other things, got to get out of the house. The last thing you're doing moment to moment is thinking about that company you're advising. So while I am ashamed to say that I haven't really had any great mentors, I'm more ashamed of saying that that's kind of on me, because I never proactively reached out and managed it. And that, again, is something that that all the founders and developers and everybody else in the games industry out there listening, you can fix that. You can go find people, put something on the calendar for each one of you to talk every month, and problem solve.
Yeah.
Who are you?
For anyone listening, Eric is available to be your mentee.
Quite possibly. Who do you look up to?
Who do I look up to? There's a lady named Christy Johnson who has 3 young kids, started a business, has helped so many women in entrepreneurship, just helped with the most basic things when I started my company. Janice Machala and Chris Mandarino have helped me so much. I have so many people that I ask for help all the time, or just what they think about this. I ask people for things all the time, but that's how I get things in life.
Can I be on your list as well? Will you remember to ask me for shit?
I would be happy to ask you for things. So sometimes I get volunteered for my wedding. My jewelry store, who made me my ring, the guy's like, "Hey, you can wear anything you want for your wedding. Just pick whatever you want out." And he wrote me an IOU on a piece of paper. But I think I was like, hey, maybe I asked him, like, do you ever loan stuff out or something? You just have to ask people for stuff.
Yeah,
so
it's true.
I have a list.
It's true. Ask.
Yeah. I'm not ashamed. Not ashamed to ask. Yeah.
Who do you help? Who do you help?
Be careful what you wish for. Who do I help? I help people probably once a week. I'll have a call with a candidate who I don't have a job for, but needs help with their resume, especially if it's a woman, close to my heart, like help having confidence in themselves that they don't suck and that they've just been maybe doing their job search wrong. Maybe they're just applying, or their resume doesn't explain their career gap, or they had their own startup and now they want to work for somebody else, but nobody's going to see that and they haven't explained it. That was my one last week. So I help people in that way. And then sometimes I help companies tell them, I help them find out what they're really looking for, because they don't really know what they want, or they think they know what they want, but they copied a job description from Riot and they're like, yeah, we want this. Like, you don't even know. So we have.
You said that in the very beginning, right? You get to the why with hires.
Why do you want this? And why do you want this job? Right? Like, do you even want this job? What do you need? I just like to talk to people, about what they want. We've been talking to Eric Marcoullier, who's co-founder of BPM140 Consulting. Eric, where can people go to have you coach them, become your mentor, find out more about you, read your blog?
So, first of all, marcoullier.com, which I'm going to start. There'll be a link in the description, I'm sure, but marcoullier.com. The easier thing to spell is obvioustartupadvice.com.
So good.
Speaks to how I look at anything that I provide. And then connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm doing most of my writing these days. And 100%, anybody who is starting a company, anybody who is thinking about starting a company, I will do my absolute best to make an hour to sit down, hear about what they're doing. Like I said, if I were absolutely independently wealthy, I'd still just spend 40 hours a week helping founders because people do cool stuff. And I like hearing about it and being helpful. So anybody that wants some free coaching, send me a note and I'm happy to do so.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to the show this week. To catch all the latest from Here's Waldo, you can follow us on LinkedIn. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes. We'll see you next time.